The old man kept eating his pie while three bikers surrounded his table at Mel's truck stop. Their leather jackets creaked as they leaned closer, expecting fear that never came. The biggest one, Snake, slammed his fist on the worn Formica surface, making the coffee cup jump. "You deaf, old-timer?" Snake growled. "This is our table now." The man looked up slowly, chewing thoughtfully. His weathered hands stayed steady on his fork. Around 70, gray beard neatly trimmed, wearing a simple flannel shirt and jeans. Nothing remarkable except his eyes, which held something the bikers couldn't quite place. "I'm almost finished," the old man said quietly, taking another bite. Snake's face reddened. His two companions, Razor and Tank, chuckled and cracked their knuckles. Other truck stop patrons glanced nervously toward the confrontation, but nobody moved to help. "You got 10 seconds to move your wrinkled ass," Snake snarled, "or we'll move it for you." The old man nodded toward Snake's colors. "Nice patchwork. You boys ride hard to earn those." Snake's hand shot toward the man's collar, but stopped when those calm eyes met his. Something in that steady gaze made his skin crawl. This wasn't fear or defiance. This was something else entirely. Something that made Snake suddenly wish he'd picked a different table. The distant thrum of rotor blades cut through the truck stop's tension like a blade through silk. Snake's hand froze inches from the old man's shirt as all heads turned skyward. The sound grew louder, deeper, until two black helicopters thundered overhead and circled back. "What the hell?" Snake muttered, his bravado evaporating. The old man calmly finished his last bite of pie and wiped his mouth with a napkin. Through the diner's windows, everyone watched the helicopters hover above the parking lot. Dust swirled in violent circles as thick ropes dropped from both aircraft. 12 figures in full tactical gear fast-stroked down with military precision. Their boots hit the asphalt in perfect synchronization. Within seconds, they formed a protective perimeter around the truck stop entrance, weapons ready, faces hidden behind night vision goggles despite the afternoon sun. The lead operator pushed through the diner's glass doors, scanning the room until his eyes locked on the old man. He strode directly to the table where Snake and his crew stood frozen in disbelief. "Sir," the SEAL said, snapping to attention, "we received your signal. Are you secure?" The old man stood slowly, his casual demeanor unchanged. "All good here, son. Just finishing lunch." Snake's jaw dropped. His two companions backed away as more SEALs filed through the entrance. Every patron in the truck stop stared in stunned silence at the impossible scene unfolding before them. Two county sheriff cruisers pulled into the truck stop parking lot, their sirens wailing as they weaved between the hovering helicopters. Sheriff Martinez stepped out, hand instinctively moving toward her weapon until she saw the SEAL's disciplined formation. Her radio crackled with confused dispatch calls about military aircraft in civilian airspace. The lead SEAL approached her with hands visible, removing his helmet to reveal a weathered face marked by countless missions. "Mam, Lieutenant Commander Hayes, Naval Special Warfare. We're providing security for a high-value individual." Martinez looked past him toward the diner where the old man sat calmly finishing his coffee while her deputies tried to process witness statements from babbling truckers and waitresses. Snake and his crew huddled near their motorcycles, looking like scolded children. "High-value individual?" Martinez asked. "That's Frank Morrison. He comes in here every Tuesday for pie." "Yes, ma'am," Hayes replied without elaboration. Through her radio, Martinez heard her dispatcher fielding calls from news outlets who'd spotted the helicopters. Social media posts were already spreading across the county. Whatever had just happened at Mel's truck stop was about to become very public very quickly. The old man stood and walked toward them, moving with a subtle confidence that Martinez was only now beginning to notice. "Frank," she called out, "what exactly is going on here?" Frank Morrison smiled at Sheriff Martinez with the same gentle expression she'd seen every Tuesday for 3 years. "Just some old friends dropping by unexpectedly," he said, gesturing toward the tactical team that maintained their protective positions around the diner's perimeter. Martinez studied his face, searching for any sign of the man she thought she knew. The Frank Morrison who ordered apple pie and black coffee, who asked about her daughter's softball games, who paid his tab with exact change and left modest tips. That man couldn't possibly warrant 12 Navy SEALs dropping from helicopters. Lieutenant Commander Hayes stepped closer to Frank, speaking in low tones that Martinez couldn't quite hear. She caught fragments, situation developing, assets compromised, immediate extraction recommended. Frank shook his head firmly, pointing toward his unfinished coffee. Meanwhile, Snake had found his voice again. He approached Martinez on unsteady legs, his earlier bravado completely shattered. "Sheriff, that old man, he's not what he seems. We're just messing around, and then those helicopters came out of nowhere." Martinez watched Frank laugh at something Hayes had said, a sound so ordinary it seemed impossible against the backdrop of military helicopters and tactical operators. Her radio crackled again with reports of unmarked vehicles heading toward their location from the interstate. Whatever Frank Morrison really was, more people were coming to find out. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows roared into the parking lot, followed by a convoy of military Humvees that formed a protective barrier around the entire truck stop. Men in dark suits emerged from the SUVs, while soldiers in desert camouflage took positions alongside the SEALs. Frank sighed and finally pushed his coffee cup away. "Looks like lunch is over," he told Martinez. The sheriff watched in amazement as every new arrival immediately deferred to this man she'd thought was just a retired mechanic. A stern-faced woman in a business suit approached their table, speaking into a secure phone. "Sir, we have a problem. The Kozlov Syndicate intercepted communications about your location. Intel suggests they're mobilizing assets in this sector." Frank's demeanor shifted subtly. The gentle grandfather disappeared, replaced by something harder, more focused. His eyes scanned the truck stop's layout with tactical precision, noting sight lines and defensive positions. "How many?" he asked quietly. 12 to 15 hostiles, possibly more. "They'll be here within the hour," the woman replied. "Sir, we need to extract you immediately." Frank stood slowly, his movements now deliberate and measured. Sheriff Martinez noticed how the SEALs unconsciously straightened when he rose, their respect bordering on reverence. "No extraction," Frank said firmly. "Too many civilians here. We hold position and end this." Martinez felt her blood chill. "In what?" "Frank, what's happening?" Frank looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. "Something I should have finished 20 years ago." Frank moved through the diner with fluid precision, his earlier casual shuffle replaced by the purposeful stride of a seasoned operator. He pointed to specific SEALs, issuing orders in clipped military speak that transformed the chaotic scene into organized preparation. "Windows, exits, sightlines," he commanded. "Civilians to the kitchen cooler. Sheriff, get your deputies positioned behind the counter. Hayes, I want overwatch on that water tower." Lieutenant Commander Hayes nodded without question, speaking rapidly into his throat mic. Within minutes, the truck stop had become a fortress. Patrons huddled in the reinforced kitchen, while waitresses distributed bottles of water with shaking hands. Snake approached Frank hesitantly. "Old man, sir, what can we do?" Frank studied the 3 bikers for a moment. "You boys know these back roads?" "Better than anybody," Snake replied eagerly. Frank pointed toward the rear exit. "There's a service road half a mile east. When this starts, you get those civilians to safety. Can you handle that?" Snake straightened, pride replacing his earlier shame. "Yes, sir." Through the windows, dust clouds appeared on the horizon. Multiple vehicles approaching fast. Frank checked his watch and spoke into Hayes' radio with calm authority that sent chills down Martinez's spine. "Kozlov's early. All units, weapons hot. Remember, we protect the innocents first. Everything else is secondary." The gentle retiree was completely gone now, replaced by someone Martinez was beginning to understand had never truly left the battlefield. The first shots shattered the truck stop's front windows as 5 black sedans screamed into the parking lot. Automatic weapons fire erupted from the vehicles, while Frank's team responded with disciplined precision. The SEALs' training showed as they maintained controlled bursts, each shot calculated and purposeful. Frank moved behind the counter with Sheriff Martinez, his hands steady as he assembled a rifle that Hayes had provided. 20 years since I held one of these, he murmured, then fired 3 perfect shots that dropped 2 advancing gunmen. The Kozlov operatives had expected an easy target, not a fortified position defended by America's elite warriors. Their aggressive assault quickly devolved into desperate cover-seeking as Frank's tactical positioning proved devastatingly effective. Hayes spoke into his radio from the water tower. "Sir, we have flanking movement on the south side. 6 hostiles moving through the truck yard." Frank nodded, pointing to 2 SEALs. "Johnson, Williams, take the service entrance. Martinez, your deputies know those storage areas?" "Better than anyone," she replied, amazed at how naturally she followed his commands. The battle intensified as Kozlov reinforcements arrived. Frank remained calm at the center of the storm, calling out positions and coordinating fire with the expertise of someone who had done this countless times before. Every decision he made saved lives. Every order he gave was perfectly timed. This was no retired mechanic defending himself. This was a master tactician executing a flawless defense. The final Kozlov assault came as a coordinated push from 3 directions, but Frank had anticipated their desperation move. His voice carried across the battlefield with unshakable authority as he orchestrated the counterattack. Now he commanded. The water tower erupted with suppressing fire, while Frank led a flanking maneuver through the kitchen that caught the remaining operatives completely off guard. Sheriff Martinez watched in awe as this 70-year-old man moved with the fluid grace of someone half his age, clearing corners with textbook precision. The last Kozlov gunman tried to use a wounded trucker as a human shield, pressing his pistol against the man's temple. Frank appeared behind him like a ghost, his movements so swift and silent that Martinez barely saw the takedown. The gunman crumpled unconscious before he could react. "All clear," Hayes reported from his overwatch position. Frank helped the wounded trucker to his feet, checking his injuries with gentle hands. The transformation back to caring grandfather happened as quickly as his earlier shift to warrior mode. Only the slight tremor in his fingers betrayed the adrenaline still coursing through his system. Snake emerged from the service road with the evacuated civilians, his face filled with something approaching worship. The 3 bikers who had terrorized Frank an hour earlier now looked at him like he was a mythical figure stepped out of legend. The battle was over, but Frank Morrison's true identity was just beginning to be understood. As emergency vehicles flooded the truck stop parking lot, a pristine black sedan pulled through the chaos with obvious priority. A 4-star general stepped out, his uniform immaculate despite the urgency that had brought him here. Every soldier and SEAL in the area snapped to attention. "General Morrison," the officer said, approaching Frank with visible relief. Sheriff Martinez felt her world tilt. "General Morrison?" She stared at the man she'd known as a quiet retiree who fixed old engines and paid for pie with exact change. Frank straightened slightly, his casual demeanor shifting to acknowledge the respect being shown. "Tom," he said simply, greeting the general like an old friend. "Sir, we monitored the situation from CENTCOM. When we realized Kozlov had found you, we mobilized everything we had," General Harrison explained. "The entire base has been on high alert." Martinez finally found her voice. "General? Frank, you're a general?" Frank smiled with gentle embarrassment. "Was. Retired 20 years ago." Lieutenant General Franklin Morrison, Harrison corrected. Medal of Honor recipient, architect of Operation Desert Shield, and the man who personally eliminated 3 terrorist cells before most people knew they existed. Snake approached hesitantly, his earlier swagger completely replaced by genuine reverence. "Sir, I had no idea. If I'd known who you were." Frank placed a hand on the biker's shoulder. "Son, today you helped save innocent lives. That's all that matters." The legendary war hero was still just Frank Morrison, but now everyone understood why 12 Navy SEALs had dropped everything to protect him. News crews arrived within the hour, but General Harrison had already established a secure perimeter. Frank sat quietly in Mel's rebuilt dining room, watching paramedics treat the wounded while crime scene investigators documented the battlefield that had been his peaceful lunch spot. Lieutenant Commander Hayes approached with a formal document. "Sir, Pentagon wants you back in an advisory capacity. The Kozlov network had tentacles we didn't realize. They'll try again." Frank studied the papers without touching them. "I'm 70 years old, Hayes. I came here to fix engines and eat pie in peace." "With respect, sir," Hayes replied, "what you did today proves you're still the most capable tactical mind in the service. Those men followed you into battle because they knew you'd bring them home alive." Through the window, Frank watched Snake teaching his crew how to properly salute the departing SEALs. The bikers who had threatened him hours earlier were now asking for autographs and photos with the special operators. Sheriff Martinez sat across from Frank, still processing everything she'd witnessed. 3 years, she said quietly. 3 years I served coffee to a living legend and never knew it. Frank smiled sadly. "That was the point, Linda. I wanted to be just Frank Morrison for a while." Outside, a crowd had gathered despite the security perimeter. Word was spreading through social media and local news. The quiet retirement Frank had carefully built was ending, whether he wanted it or not. 6 months later, Frank Morrison still came to Mel's truck stop every Tuesday for pie and coffee. But everything had changed. A bronze plaque by the entrance read, "Mel's truck stop where heroes dine," and tourists made pilgrimages hoping to meet the legend. Snake and his crew had become unofficial security, their leather jackets now bearing patches that read Morrison's Guardians. They'd traded intimidation for protection, watching over the man who'd shown them what real strength looked like. Sheriff Martinez poured Frank's coffee, noting how he signed autographs with patient grace for every visitor. The Pentagon had built him a secure office in town, where he consulted on counterterrorism operations twice a week. His quiet retirement had evolved into something more purposeful. A young Marine approached nervously, clutching a photo. "Sir, would you sign this for my daughter? She wants to join the service because of your story." Frank smiled, the same gentle expression Martinez remembered from before the world knew who he was. "What's her name, son?" "Sarah, sir. She's 16 and tougher than most Marines I know." As Frank signed the photo, he looked up at the young Marine with pride. "Tell Sarah that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right even when you're afraid." The Marine left with tears in his eyes. Frank returned to his pie, still just Frank Morrison at heart, but now a symbol of hope for an entire generation who needed to believe that heroes still walked among them. Have you ever misjudged someone based on appearances? Tell us about a time when someone surprised you with their hidden strength. Snake stumbled backward, his face pale as chalk while his crew pressed against the wall like cornered animals. The lead SEAL maintained his protective stance beside Frank, scanning the diner for threats while his team secured every entrance and exit. The other truck stop patrons sat frozen in their booths, coffee cups suspended halfway to their lips as they tried to process what they were witnessing. An elderly waitress named Dolores clutched her order pad with shaking hands, staring at Frank like she was seeing him for the first time. "Sir, do you require medical attention?" the SEAL asked, his voice carrying genuine concern. Frank shook his head, brushing pie crumbs from his flannel shirt with casual indifference. "Just finishing my dessert, Lieutenant." False alarm on the signal. The SEAL nodded, but didn't relax his vigilance. His teammates remained positioned throughout the diner, their presence transforming the humble truck stop into something resembling a military command center. Snake found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Who are you?" Frank looked at him with the same patient expression he'd worn throughout their confrontation. Just a man trying to enjoy his pie in peace. But the way the SEALs deferred to him, the way they called him sir with genuine reverence, told a completely different story. Whatever Frank Morrison really was, it was becoming clear that 3 bikers had just made the biggest mistake of their lives by choosing the wrong old man to intimidate.